My name is Danielle Hayes. I'm 29, and for the past 7 years, I believed wholeheartedly that I was building my future inside my father's company. I thought every late night, every missed holiday, and every crisis I solved was shaping me into the woman who would one day run the business he had poured his life into. If anyone had asked me even a year ago, I would have said I was proud of where I stood, proud of the responsibility, proud of the trust, proud of the legacy I thought I was becoming part of. But now looking back, I realize I was only borrowing a seat in a room my father had already promised to someone else. The day everything started to unravel didn't look like a disaster at first. It was a Monday morning, like any other foggy quiet, the kind of morning where coffee feels like a lifeline. Dad had texted me the night before asking me to come in early to talk. We did that sometimes, especially during peak season, so I didn't think much of it. I even told my boyfriend Samuel that I'd probably be home late, joking that Dad was preparing some new expansion I'd have to untangle. If only it had been that simple. When I walked into his office that morning, the air felt different. My father was already seated behind his massive mahogany desk, polished and posing the same desk I'd watched him build this company from. But it wasn't his posture that struck me. It was the presence of another person in the room. My younger sister, Jasmine, 23 years old, freshly out of college, more invested in influencer marketing and dance challenges than logistics. She sat across from Dad with a smug little smile, like she already knew something I didn't. "Danielle," Dad said gently, gesturing to the empty chair beside Jasmine, "come sit." I sat, slowly. "We've been discussing the future," he began, and I swear his voice didn't sound like my father's. It was practiced, polished, like he'd recited the speech in the mirror, and we've decided it's time to start transitioning some responsibilities. I blinked, waiting for clarity. Dad continued, "I want you to begin training Jasmine. Show her everything, account systems, client relationships. Eventually, she'll be taking over operations." I heard the words, but my mind refused to make sense of them. "Taking over my role?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. Dad nodded, as if it were the most natural thing in the world. "You'll still be essential, of course. You'll transition into a more strategic position, broader oversight, less day-to-day work." Strategic, such a clean, vague word, a word that meant nothing and everything. Jasmine twirled a pen between her fingers, flashing the same mischievous grin she used when she accidentally crashed my birthday dinner last year to make a TikTok livestream. "Oh, don't worry, Danny," she said playfully. "You'll still matter. I just need a little crash course. It won't take long." The room tilted for a moment. I forced a smile because I didn't know what else to do. My entire body felt warm and cold at the same time, like someone had opened a window in January. "Is this final?" I asked. Dad sighed, like I was overreacting. "It's already in motion. Investors love fresh perspectives. Youth, energy. Youth, not competence, not experience, not loyalty. Youth." When the meeting ended, Jasmine practically skipped out of the office like she'd just won a raffle. I followed more slowly, my thoughts a tangled mess. I wanted to tell myself this was temporary, that Dad didn't mean it the way it sounded, that maybe I was misunderstanding something. But the universe has a cruel way of confirming our fears quickly. 2 hours later, I walked into my office, my space, the one I had worked in, cried in, solved hundreds of problems, in only to find the door open and painters inside. Fresh paint buckets, plastic sheets, Jasmine's Amazon boxes piled against the wall filled with neon LED lights, a ring light, and a plush ergonomic gaming chair. My nameplate was gone, just like that. I stood in the doorway, invisible, in a place where I'd given everything. A man with a roller glanced at me. "They told us this needed to be finished by tomorrow," he said. "New manager moves in at the end of the week." My chest tightened. I nodded, swallowed the burn rising in my throat, and walked away before anyone could see the tremble in my hands. The next few days felt like walking through mud. Every action took effort. Every interaction felt wrong. I tried to convince myself there had to be some explanation, but the signs kept piling up. Emails meant for me were rerouted to Jasmine. Clients I'd nurtured for years were suddenly being transitioned to her. She walked around the office like she was auditioning for the role of CEO in a reality show, asking interns where the snack fridge was, filming clips in storage areas because the aesthetic was grungy chic. Once I found her asking one of our longest-standing drivers if he could do a pretend loading sequence for her content. I wanted to scream. Instead, I kept my silence. Maybe that was my biggest flaw. Too much silence. Too much belief that loyalty would be recognized. That effort meant something. That family meant something. But it kept getting worse. One rainy afternoon, I found myself sitting with Jasmine on the client relations call. She insisted on leading, even though she didn't know the difference between net 30 and net 45 terms. She giggled her way through the meeting, then accidentally voided a long-standing contract with Shannon Freight Lines by approving an AI-generated route that sent their trucks into a storm zone. 2 rigs crashed. A driver was hospitalized. I cleaned up the mess. Or tried to. When I called my father desperate for help, he brushed me off. "She's still learning," he said. "Cut her some slack." Slack, for something that could have killed someone. That was when something inside me cracked. But the moment that finished the break came a week later at lunchtime. I confronted Dad at our usual Greek restaurant, a place filled with memories. Places where he once bragged about my work ethic and told me I reminded him of his younger self. This time he didn't even look proud to see me. When I asked if I was being phased out, he didn't deny it, didn't soften it, didn't even hesitate. Maybe it's time, he said, simply for someone younger to take a shot. Younger, not better, not smarter, just younger. I left before the food arrived. My hands were shaking too hard to hold a fork. 3 days later, Jasmine threw a promotion cupcakes party in the break room. Pink icing, gold sprinkles. Congrats, new head of operations spelled out in edible glitter. Everyone clapped. Cameras flashed. And when I stepped into the room, people shifted aside as if I were intruding on someone else's celebration. That's when I knew. Dad wasn't giving Jasmine a chance. He was replacing me. I didn't yell. I didn't make a scene. I didn't cry. I simply walked into my father's office, stood there while he looked up with mild annoyance and said quietly, "I quit." He didn't even try to stop me. And that silence, the ease with which he let me go, hurt more deeply than anything he'd ever said. I left the office without looking back, my entire world shrinking behind me with every step. I didn't know yet that losing everything would be the thing that saved me. But at that moment, all I felt was a hollow, sharp ache in my chest, and the cold realization that the legacy I thought I belonged to had never been mine at all. If someone had told me that quitting would hurt more the next day than the moment I walked out, I wouldn't have believed them. But that first morning afterward, God, it hit like a truck. I woke up in my small apartment, the one filled with reminders of late nights paperwork and emergency phone calls, and for the first time in 7 years, I had nowhere to be. No meetings, no fires to put out, no trucks to reroute, no clients waiting on me. Just silence. A silence so big it felt like it was swallowing me. Samuel, my boyfriend, had stayed over the night before. He kept asking if I was okay, moving around my kitchen, trying to soften the edge of my mood with coffee and soft touches. Samuel was gentle like that, steady, thoughtful, the kind of man who brought calm instead of chaos. But even he couldn't reach whatever storm was building inside me. "Danny," he said softly, placing a warm mug into my hands, "you did the right thing." I nodded, but I didn't believe it yet. Not fully. There was this hollow space inside me that kept echoing with Dad's voice. "You've had your time." Time. Like 7 years of sweat and sacrifice were some seasonal trend he could box up and replace. The days that followed blurred together. I slept too much, or not at all. I ordered takeout, I barely ate. I ignored calls from coworkers who were concerned and texting things like, "Are you okay? It feels weird without you here. Things are different." Samuel tried to pull me out of the fog. He'd take me on long walks, cook dinner, talk about small things, the weather, a new gadget at work. But he never pushed. He let me exist in whatever form I managed to be that day, and I loved him for that. But even his warmth couldn't drown the creeping doubt in me. Who was I now? For 7 years, I was Danielle Hayes, the right hand of Hayes, logistics, the dependable daughter, the one people relied on, the one clients trusted, the one who kept everything running while Dad slowly stepped back. Without that, what was left? On the 6th day, something shifted. Not a breakthrough, not clarity, just a spark. It came in the form of a text from Marcus, the head of fleet maintenance, a man who rarely spoke in full sentences, let alone emotional ones. "You didn't deserve that, Danielle." 5 simple words, but they cracked through something. Then more messages trickled in over the next few days. "Rita from accounting morale is already down. Jasmine is not ready. Kim from customer service. She tried to send a client a GIF. A GIF, Danny. One of the dispatchers, everything is chaos. Honestly, we miss you." Each message was a reminder that the company I'd given my life to didn't run on Dad's authority or Jasmine's fresh ideas. It ran on the people who trusted me, respected me, believed in me. And they were hurting. On the 10th day, Samuel came over after work and found me sitting at my desk, still messy from the chaos of my exit, staring at an untouched sandwich. "You're thinking about going back, aren't you?" he said gently. I swallowed. "I don't know." "Yes, you do." He knelt beside the chair, taking my hands. Going back wouldn't fix what they broke. The words stung because they were true. Return to Woshong, what a family that didn't think twice before replacing me. A sister who thought running operations was just another trend to try out. A father too blinded by his own pride to see what he was losing. I shook my head. I just don't know what I am without that job. Samuel held my gaze steady and unwavering. "You're Danielle," he said. "Not Hayes Logistics, not his shadow. You're you. And whatever you build next, it'll be yours." His words planted something inside me. A seed. But before I could understand what it meant, another disaster at the office would push me further from doubt and closer to the fire. It happened 3 days later. Jasmine lasted exactly 6 days before she caused her first major catastrophe. I only heard about it because Shannon Freightlines, the family-run client we'd had for over a decade, called me directly. I answered instinctively, thinking it might be a mistake. Danielle Marie Shannon's voice crackled through the phone, fraught with exhaustion and anger. "I know you're not with the company anymore, but I don't know who else to call." Ice flooded my veins. What happened? "Your sister Marie Spat sent our trucks through a storm zone. 2 rigs are totaled. One of our drivers, Tom, broke his leg. The doctors say surgery." My stomach twisted. "She approved some AI route generator without checking the weather reports," Marie continued. "Then she sent me a GIF when I complained. A GIF of some girl shrugging." I closed my eyes, breathing through the anger rising in my chest. "That shouldn't have happened," I said quietly. "Marie, I'm so sorry." She sighed. "It wasn't your fault, but you should know your father defended her. Said she's learning." Of course he did. After the call ended, my hands trembled so badly, I set the phone down before I dropped it. My blood felt too hot, too heavy. Jasmine wasn't just inexperienced. She wasn't just careless. She was dangerous. A driver was in the hospital, a loyal client was on the brink of collapse, and my father's response, "She's learning." The next day, unable to hold it in any longer, I confronted my father. We met again at the Greek restaurant. The same table, the same chairs. But this time the air felt sour. "Why didn't you stop her?" I demanded. "Shannon Freightlines has been with us since I was 19. You let her send a GIF after a major accident." Dad didn't flinch. "She made a mistake. Everyone makes mistakes." "I would have been fired for something like that," I said, on the spot. "You're not 23, Dad replied coolly. "You should be able to manage around her inexperience." There it was. The shift. The dismissal. The clear, sharp truth that cut deeper than any betrayal. He wasn't handing Jasmine an opportunity. He was forcing me to carry her. My throat tightened. "Dad," I said quietly, "you're breaking the company." He shook his head. "You're being dramatic." Maybe I was, or maybe he was blind. But one thing had finally become undeniable. The girl who walked away was not the same woman who now wanted something more than a paycheck or a title. I wanted freedom. I wanted purpose. I wanted to build something my father couldn't replace. That night, for the first time since quitting, I opened my laptop. The screen glowed onto my face like a quiet promise. A blank document, a blinking cursor, a spark in my chest. I typed a title at the top, Phase 1. I didn't know what Phase 1 meant yet. But I knew this. My story didn't end with walking away. It began with starting over. If Phase 1 had been a whisper, Phase 2 hit me like a jolt. Once the idea took root that I could build something of my own, it wouldn't let me go. It followed me around my apartment like a shadow. It tugged at my thoughts during breakfast, whispered at me when I lay awake at night, nudged me when I sat staring at my empty calendar. And one evening, as I watched rain streak down my window, the whisper finally solidified into a sentence. You don't need their approval to build your future. So I started. I opened my laptop at the tiny folding table in my living room, a table that had known more takeout containers and overdue receipts than dreams. And I began sketching out what a real logistics company could look like if it were built with intention, focus, honesty. I named it Forge Logistics. Forge, a place where something new is hammered into existence, a place where heat and pressure create strength, a place where you build from scratch. It felt right. For the next week, I buried myself in the work. Business registration, website templates, cost sheets, contract drafts, driver network reconnections. Every detail I had once handled under Dad's company, I now built with my own hands, shaping the foundation one piece at a time. It was exhausting. But for the first time in months, the exhaustion felt purposeful. Samuel supported me every step. If I forgot to eat, he brought me food. If I doubted myself, he reminded me who I was. His ex-girlfriend even popped up once, messaged him out of nowhere, trying to stir old memories. He showed me the message immediately, his voice steady. She's part of my past. You're my future. It grounded me, reminded me that not everything in my life was falling apart. Some things were holding me together. But rebuilding your world from the ashes isn't linear. It's messy. It's humbling. It's chaotic. My first pitch call froze mid-sentence when my Wi-Fi cut out. I had to finish the conversation from a Starbucks parking lot with rain pounding on the roof. One day I double-booked 2 drivers because I forgot to update my spreadsheet. Another day I sent an invoice with the wrong decimal placement. Growing pains. But they were mine. And then 2 weeks after I started Forge, I got a call that changed everything. Marie Shannon. I answered immediately, breath held. Danielle, she said, voice tight. We still haven't renewed with your father's company. After the storm incident, well, trust is complicated. I understand, I said quietly. But I've heard you're starting something on your own. I froze. Yes, I said. It's small right now, but I'm building something better, something careful, something personal. Marie exhaled. If you build it, Danielle, I'll be your first client. I didn't cry, but something inside me lit up like a fuse. The next morning, I signed a contract with her. 4 routes, weekly schedules, clear terms. It wasn't huge. It wasn't glamorous. But it was the first time in my life that a client belonged to me. Not Dad, not Jasmine, not the company I'd given years to. Me. From there, Forge started growing not fast, but steady, like a seedling pushing through dirt. I reached out to drivers I'd known for years, men and women who trusted my word more than any contract. Some had left my father's company after Jasmine's mismanagement. Some had stayed out of loyalty to me, even though I was no longer there. They listened, they asked questions, and they said yes. One driver, Louise, told me, if you're running it, I'm in. I don't work well with chaos. Chaos? What an elegant word for my sister's leadership style. I hired a virtual assistant overseas, a bright woman named Talia, who typed faster than anyone I'd ever seen and organized my calendar like it was a work of art. I invested in open-source software to track invoices and shipments. I bought a second-hand whiteboard and mounted it on my living room wall with cheap adhesive strips. Every morning, I woke up to a to-do list filled with possibility. Every night, I fell asleep exhausted but satisfied. I wasn't just rebuilding my life, I was reclaiming it. And yet something else was happening. Something I hadn't expected. People were talking. Not because I was advertising, I didn't have the money for that, but because word travels fast in logistics. It travels through truck stops, warehouses, loading docks, dispatch centers. It travels through late-night driver calls and vendor chats and industry whispers. And what they were saying was simple. Danielle is doing it right. Clients who had tolerated Jasmine's incompetence reached out quietly asking if I could handle one small shipment or take over a few routes temporarily. Vendors who had been ignored began asking about my availability. But the moment that made me truly understand the shift came on a random Tuesday afternoon. I'd stopped at a small supply store to pick up ink cartridges for my overworked printer. As I walked out into the parking lot, arms full, I glanced across the cars and I saw her. Jasmine. Flashing sunglasses, designer bag, freshly detailed Audi. She looked like she was on her way to a brunch photo shoot rather than operations. Her laughter was loud enough for me to hear even across the parking lot as she talked on speakerphone. She didn't see me, or maybe she did and didn't care, but the way she flipped her hair, the way she leaned on the hood as if posing, the way she spoke to whoever was on the phone, it was a chilling reminder. She still thought she'd won. I stood there watching her, feeling a slow, controlled fire kindle in my chest. I wasn't angry. I wasn't jealous. I wasn't even hurt anymore. I was focused. That evening back home, I pulled out a notebook and began writing not names, not grudges, not petty revenge fantasies. Systems, weak points, gaps in the market, vendors my father's company mistreated, clients who were quietly searching for better service, drivers who deserved a boss who respected them. Not sabotage. Strategy, because I didn't want to destroy anything. I wanted to build something so strong, so undeniable, that their neglect would crumble on its own. Forge wasn't just my company anymore. It was my truth. My answer to everything they said I wasn't. And as I sat there surrounded by notes and ideas and the buzzing ambition that had finally reawakened inside me, I realized something. I didn't want my old life back. I wanted a life they could never take away. Tomorrow I decided I would start phase 3. Growth is a strange thing. It doesn't happen in straight lines or triumphant music swells. Sometimes it looks like slow mornings, cluttered spreadsheets, and unanswered emails. Sometimes it sounds like your phone buzzing, with small wins, one new client here, one returned call there. And sometimes, if you're lucky, it comes with a warning from the universe. Keep going, they're cracking. It started with whispers. Rita texted me first 3 contracts down in 2 weeks. Jasmine promised things she can't deliver. Then Luis, one of the drivers still working under my father's company, messaged me during a break. The place is chaos. No schedules, no communication. People are leaving. I read every message, slowly letting the words sink in like rain on dry soil. I didn't smile. I didn't celebrate. But deep inside, in a place that had been numbed for months, I felt something awaken. Validation. Not revenge, not triumph, just truth confirming itself. Still, I didn't act on anything. Not yet. Forge was growing, but we were still small. Barely crawling, compared to the corporate machine my father once commanded. If I moved too soon, if I struck prematurely, all I'd earn was unnecessary attention. But reality doesn't wait for perfect timing. 2 weeks after Forge hit 8 steady clients, Rita asked to meet. We chose the same ramen place we always did, halfway between her office and my apartment. Neutral territory. She slid into the booth across from me, tired enough that even the bright neon signs outside couldn't soften the exhaustion on her face. "You look done," I said gently. Rita snorted. "That's because I am." What happened now? She didn't even wait for the waiter to bring water. Birchwood Construction walked out. My stomach dropped. Birchwood was one of the biggest contracts the company had. Losing them wasn't a crack, it was a fracture. How? Why? Jasmine promised them a fleet upgrade we didn't have, Rita said bitterly. She didn't check inventory, didn't check the vendor agreements, didn't check budget approvals. She just, Rita threw her hands up, promised the moon because she thought it sounded impressive. And your dad let it happen? Oh no, she laughed darkly. He blamed me. What? He forwarded the email chain to corporate leadership, she said, but deleted the parts where I warned her. 3 times. For a moment, I forgot how to breathe. He doctored your emails. Yep, and your father believed her version. My blood went cold. Not because of the lying, not because of the blatant manipulation, but because I realized something clearly for the first time. They weren't just incompetent, they were desperate. And desperation makes people reckless. When Rita left, she hugged me tightly and whispered, "You made the right choice leaving. I wish I had." I didn't tell her that the guilt I felt, the guilt for leaving everyone else behind, was still heavy. Maybe too heavy. But guilt isn't a strategy, and strategy was what Forge needed next. That night, I stayed up until 3 a.m., staring at a blank document on my laptop. I wasn't thinking about revenge. I wasn't even thinking about reclaiming what I'd lost. I was thinking about the people trapped under Jasmine's glitter-coated incompetence, people who once relied on my leadership, people who deserve stability. If Forge was going to grow, it would grow with purpose. And purpose sometimes requires information, which is why I reached out to Marco. Marco had been the system administrator at my father's company for over a decade. Quiet, steady, chronically underpaid, and overlooked. Jasmine barely knew his name. Dad never understood how valuable he was. I had always been one of the few people who treated him like a human being. So when I texted him, "Can we talk off the record?" he replied in minutes. "Tonight, usual bar." We met at a dim dive bar, tucked between a pawn shop and an abandoned laundromat. Marco sat at the counter, nursing a whiskey hoodie pulled over his head like armor. "You're doing your own thing now," he said, not looking up. "I am. And I need clarity," I said honestly. Not sabotage, not hacks, just truth. That got his attention. He turned, eyes narrowing. What kind of truth? The kind hidden behind deleted emails, missing logs, and forced transitions. The kind your current bosses pretend doesn't exist. Marco stared at me for a long moment. Hypothetically, he finally said, "If I knew about certain discrepancies, I'd send you something." Hypothetically. I nodded once. Not pushing, not hinting, just trusting. 3 days later, I woke to an encrypted zip folder in my inbox labeled Lunch Meeting Notes. Zip. Inside, gold. Email chains. Internal audit logs. Deleted warnings from Rita. Transaction histories. Broken vendor agreements. A voice recording of Jasmine calling a long-term client, a dusty relic with trucker brain. I didn't feel victorious. I felt steady. This wasn't ammunition. It was insurance. And I wasn't going to use it, not yet. Instead, I focused on what Forge needed most: clients. That's when I got a call from someone I hadn't spoken to in years, Liana Vargas, procurement lead for a mid-sized agricultural supply network. Fierce, direct, allergic to nonsense. We'd butted heads once over a delayed shipment, but she'd respected me for owning the mistake. She didn't bother with small talk. "I hear you're alive," she said. "Last I checked," I replied. "I've got a problem," she continued. "Your sister promised me a 3-day turnaround on livestock feed. Took 6, then told me to adjust my expectations because she's shifting the paradigm. What does that even mean?" "It means she's drowning," I said before I could stop myself. Liana laughed a sharp, amused sound. "Send me your rates, Danielle. If you can give me 5-day delivery, or better, I'll switch. Today." My throat tightened. "I can do that." "Good. And if you deliver, I'll pass your name to the others. This industry is starved for competence." She wasn't exaggerating. 2 weeks later, 3 more of her industry contacts called me. They all had variations of the same story. Jasmine had promised them the moon, then delivered dust. Forge took them all. By the end of that month, demand was so overwhelming, I hired a second assistant, contracted 2 independent driver fleets, and built a proper client portal with the help of an open-source developer. And Jasmine still had no idea I existed, but Dad did. I knew it the moment my phone lit up with his number one Thursday afternoon. "Danielle," he said carefully, "I hear you're working with some of our clients." "They're not your clients," I said calmly. "They're clients. They choose where they get the service they need." "This isn't a game," he warned. "You're burning bridges." "No," I replied. Voice steady. "You burned them the moment you replaced competence with convenience." He exhaled sharply. "You really think you can outmaneuver us?" "I don't need to outmaneuver anyone," I said. "I just need to do better." And I was. Every day. By the time I hung up, I knew something with absolute clarity. This wasn't the climax. This was only the beginning of the fall. Their fall. A fall they built with their own hands. One mistake, one lie, one blind decision at a time. And I wasn't pushing them. I was simply no longer holding them up. The irony of fate is that when your enemies finally begin to lose ground, you don't feel joy. Not at first. You feel tension, anticipation, a strange, heavy quiet, the kind that settles before a storm finally breaks. And my storm broke on a Tuesday. Not by coincidence. I chose that day. 6 months had passed since I walked out of my father's company with nothing but my pride and the faint echo of his last words to me. 6 months of learning, drowning, crawling, rebuilding. 6 months of long nights, early mornings, missed meals, and victories, small enough to go unnoticed until they weren't small anymore. Forge Logistics wasn't the scrappy experiment it once was. We were real, steady, growing. 20 clients, 2 contracted fleets, a warehouse lease pending, a team that trusted me, a reputation built on silent consistency instead of empty promises. Meanwhile, Hayes Logistics was bleeding, slowly at first, then all at once. Their contracts fell like dominoes. Their driver retention plummeted. Vendors stopped taking their calls. Investors grew restless. Reports became a mess of overdue invoices, mismatched forms, and desperate restructuring plans. Jasmine tried covering the cracks with LinkedIn posts about embracing change and the power of fresh leadership. Dad clung to the idea that loyalty alone could hold together an entire company. But loyalty cannot replace competence, and incompetence left unchecked becomes collapse. That Tuesday, I invited my father to lunch. The same Greek restaurant. The same table where he once told me I had had my time as if I were a phase he'd grown out of. The same walls that had witnessed my heartbreak. He arrived looking older than I remembered. More gray at his temples. More weight in his gaze. Maybe he already sensed something was coming. "I didn't expect your call," he said as he sat down. I took a slow breath. "I figured we should talk. It's been a long 6 months." He nodded. "Jasmine's adapting." I didn't correct him. What would be the point? Instead, I cut directly to the truth. "Dad, I want to offer you something." His eyebrows twitched. "A job offer?" "No," I said. "A way out." He leaned back guarded. "Out of what exactly?" "Out of the mess you're pretending isn't happening." He stiffened, but I continued. "You've lost over $1 million in contracts this quarter. Investors are asking questions. Staff are resigning. Drivers are complaining. Vendors are pulling back. And Jasmine." I paused isn't a leader. She was never meant for this. Silence. A long, thick silence. "You have an offer then," he finally said. "I do," I replied. 2 of your remaining major clients came to me quietly. They want to switch but don't want a messy transition. I'm offering to buy those contracts outright for a generous amount. A clean break. No lawsuits, no public embarrassment. His eyes hardened. You're gutting us. No, I said softly. If I wanted to gut you, I'd let Jasmine keep doing your job. The words landed harder than I expected. He looked away, jaw working, fingers tense. I'll talk to her, he said. We'll consider it. I nodded. Then I walked out, knowing with absolute certainty that he wouldn't take the offer. Pride is a dangerous anchor, and he was going down with the ship. It took 3 days for the next shockwave to hit. A secure email came through in the morning from one of the major investors still hanging on by a thread. Attached was a copy of the audit report. They'd discovered everything. Overpromised contracts, deleted email warnings, improper budget allocations, a dozen operational failures, negligence masked as innovation, a leadership structure held together by denial. And at the center of it all, Jasmine. Within hours, 3 senior employees resigned. By that afternoon, vendors froze credit lines. By the next morning, 2 more clients left and came directly to Forge. Jasmine responded with a vague social media post about embracing new beginnings. Dad didn't post anything, didn't call, didn't try to spin a story. Silence has a way of saying everything. Then 2 days later, Jasmine came to find me. Not with a phone call, not an email, not a message. She showed up at my office. She burst into the lobby like a whirlwind, cheeks flushed, eyes blazing anger, radiating from every inch of her. My team froze mid-task as she marched toward me. Outside, she barked. I didn't argue. We stepped into the hallway. Glass doors closed behind us. She spun toward me, trembling with fury. You think you've won, don't you? I blinked. This isn't a game. You took everything, she spat. Clients, staff, Dad's trust. The whole industry is whispering about you like you're some kind of hero. I didn't take anything, I said quietly. I built something. You destroyed what you were given. Lies, her voice cracked. You sabotaged us. No, I said, calm as still water. You sabotaged yourself. All I did was stop covering for you. Her face crumpled, not in pity, not in guilt, but in realization. A realization she wasn't ready to face. She turned and stormed out, leaving me in the hallway with the echo of her footsteps fading. I didn't chase her. Some truths aren't meant to be softened. The final collapse came swiftly. Within 6 weeks, Hayes Logistics went through 2 lawsuits, a forced leadership restructuring, complete investor withdrawal, vendor termination, 4 failed client negotiations, and internal documents, leaked ones, Marco had safeguarded for years. Dad tried to salvage what he could, but desperation is not a business strategy. Eventually, the company shut down quietly. No announcements, no tribute to its decades of work, no acknowledgement of its fall. One day it existed, the next day it didn't. A ghost. My father didn't speak to me until a month later. Not a call, not a letter. A text. Short, heavy, honest in a way he rarely was. I didn't know how to let go. You were right. I just wasn't ready to admit it. I stared at that message for a long time. Then I turned my phone face down. Not out of anger, not out of pride, but because I finally understood something. I didn't need his validation anymore. I wasn't living in his shadow. I wasn't holding his company together. I wasn't waiting for him to notice me. I had built something better, something stronger, something that was entirely mine. That evening, I stepped out of my office, the real one, not the shadows of the past, and watched my team laughing over takeout planning routes, sharing stories. My whiteboard was filled with expansion ideas, new clients, color-coded notes. Forge Logistics was no longer my escape. It was my legacy. A legacy I created from nothing except determination, truth, and the refusal to disappear. For the first time in my life, I felt completely, overwhelmingly free, and I never looked back.